Thank you very much for joining us in our conversation about Industry 5.0. And I feel very blessed to have three major participants of this initiative with us today. And the idea is to have a better insight as to what Industry 5.0 is all about, certainly what the individuals are currently working on to help this initiative along the ways. And maybe there might even be a call to action for you out there of how you can perhaps participate or at least help them in their cause. And I think that would be something very noble for our conversation. So my name is Mike Boyle, and I would like to go ahead and get the show started and asking David to introduce himself and to answer one specific question. We talk about waste, and we understand that waste is something that is one of the biggest plagues that we have, in my personal opinion. But of course, we keep talking in very general terms, and so I think it would be quite useful if, when you describe yourself and you talk about the subject of waste, perhaps if you can elaborate a little bit as to what the particular problems are to where you are currently today. I think that would be fantastic. So, David, I hand the stage over to you.
Thank you, Michael, for putting this together. It's very, very essential. And good morning, good afternoon to my colleagues here. And it's nice to see you. So my name is David Ewusi-Mensah, originally from Ghana, currently living in Costa Rica. I'm the co-founder of Ewusi-Mensah Solutions in Ghana. It's a consulting, servicing, and research company within sustainability and the environment space. And I also host the Green Living Chat podcast, where we do a little bit of education and all that. I wear a couple of caps here and there, but then it's really exciting to dive into this conversation with my colleagues here. When we talk about waste, I think there are so many things that are involved, but peculiarly, I have lived in Asia for a couple of years, lived in Spain for a couple of some time as well, and currently living in the Caribbean. I've seen a trend of issues, so I'll combine what I'm learning from all these areas. And I feel like waste is something that it's a human thing. Right? I would direct it definitely to a human behavior issue, because we have not been very. It's something that came up into the society and we were not ready for it. Especially, like, I have conversations on my podcast, like Madhavi Venkatesan, who is a professor in the Northeastern University in Boston, mentioned something like, we bring things into the environmental society, innovations and other things, and we don't think about how it's going to impact us until it comes and gives us the impact before we run back and be like, okay, we are supposed to sort it out. That is our problem. So many things were innovated, we didn't think about it very well, and then here we are with a problem. So wasting, I would definitely say it's really an education problem, it's a human issue, and so many other things involved. But these are the two things that I'll put on place on top about the issues that we have over there. I'll hand it over to hear what others have to say.
Okay, George, how about you? Perhaps if you can introduce yourself and talk about our
Yeah,
favorite subject.
yeah, I'm George Varghese, currently living in Canada. And for the last 22 years, I've been in Canada. I've been privileged over the years to have lived in different countries. With my father in Africa, I've worked in the Middle East, in Kuwait, and for the last 20 years, I've been here in Canada, working in the oil and gas energy sector, putting up projects, delivering projects, different functional roles, management engineering, quality, and project management. These are my different places, hats that I put in. And on top of that, I consult and mentor others in these subjects. That's what I've got my own small consulting company that I have. And, I literally think that, we've got a system working in projects. What really connected me was that we have systems in place. And these systems are meant to support each other, and nature systems work perfectly. But over the last, 100 years, we have made these systems which may not be really looking out for each other, like the interdependencies and the interoperabilities. We really have to be looking at that. And that could be the issue that we have to really look at it more deeper. And for me, especially what concerned is the energy, energy mix that we have. I had come down here expecting, other places of the world, you have to take oil from different places and you have to make it into a refinery. It's going to go through different places. But here in Canada, we've got solar, we've got wind, we've got oil and gas. And my background has been in oil and gas. And I thought, okay, it's more easier to produce close to where it is. You can refine here, you can do your petrochemicals and all of those things. And there'll be a lot of job opportunities and lots of things. And that's what I expected. But unfortunately, it's not happened. What we've been doing, we just produce and we've been sending it to other places. And the whole transportation, logistics, and the whole energy, we're wasting so much. And, that's what made me really reflect on what should we do as an individual. And that's when, somewhere around March, April, that's when I reached out to Michael. And I looked at what he has proposed in Industry 5.0. And I said, every one of these things can be put in everywhere and systemic. We have lots and lots of people who are displaced, looking for work, trying to find out what next. We have a lot of people who need guidance in, we've got data and technology, but where do you use it? If you don't, you can have technology and data, but if you don't use it effectively and you don't do it properly with it, what's the point? So these are areas where I said, I will work with others and I can't do this alone. And that is when I said, this is the best place to be in. I hope that is.
Fantastic. Now, Michael, I think the stage is over to you.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, David and George, generally for joining me first and for really being the ambassadors who deliver the change. We have talked together, Michael, 2 years ago, if you do remember. It was a great talk. And since then, a lot have happened. George and David specify waste correctly. We do understand generally 4 categories of waste. 2 has been mentioned mainly, the physical and the process waste. But there is a urban waste and there is a social waste, which are people who does not have work because we just relocate the crude oil, we ship it somewhere and we do not process it, as George says. And there are many similar aspects all around the world. What is interesting from my perspective as the founder of Industry 5.0 is the fact that 2 years ago when we talked together, there was not a single ambassador assigned, not a single one. It was me who was doing all the projects. And today we are sitting here, and today in the morning, few hours ago, I signed for 110th country where somebody like David or George is sitting. It's generally Sri Lanka, which is suffering right now with the big issues with the politicians and so on. But still there is a man who accepted to be the ambassador and to really implement the waste prevention. Because it's not the aim of Industry 5.0 to manage the waste. No, we prevent the waste to happen. Because if we don't do that, and we follow the waste industry example, there will be more waste because more waste is equal to more money and more profit. But that's not the way how Industry 5.0 acts. So for me, waste is very clearly defined. And the most important part is waste can be prevented, no matter which one you speak about. It does not cost any money. You can do it right now, or right here, just switching here from wasteful to wasteless. And that's all what you need. And this is what I hope, together with the ambassadors, we will be able to deliver not only to people and companies, which will be rich, even more rich than today, because waste is cost. Waste is profit for just one and only category. And this is the waste industry. For all the others is cost. So that's about waste. That's about the way how we see the world, how I see it. This is the reason why I created Industry 5.0 and why I launched it on December 1st, 2015. And I am happy that it resonates the world because all of us and all the others which come after us deserve to live on a blue marble, not on a ball of mud called global landfill. That's
wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Michael. There are a number of impressions that I received from all three of you and that of what you were describing, and thank you very much for that. I'd like to start first with the one comment, Michael, that you just made, mentioning that there was one industry that profits the most, which I would not disagree with you with regards to the profit motive there. Remember you talking 2 years ago and mentioning that as far as general proceeds are concerned, and as far as the importance monetarily wise within our society, we should never underestimate the power of waste management. And of course, if we take it away, then that's their power base. But I question whether they are the only ones that have been profiting through this. If we think that looking at our economic system and understanding how it's been put together, using a term that for good, bad, or indifferent has been the motor of all of our progress, quote unquote, and that would be gross domestic product. To what degree do you see a possible source of our problems tied to this idea that we produce things that nobody needs and we call it growth? And I leave that open to anyone. David, you're nodding your head full in agreement. So perhaps if you would like to go ahead and take that one on first, and just feel free to jump in, folks.
Definitely, that's the source of the challenges that we're having right now. And really, I was just nodding because of the production level that we have currently. And I think that we are having several conversations about we have to adapt to several things. Like AI is in the system right now, and so many jobs are going to be outdated, and people have to go back home and, I don't know, be educated and adapt to the new life, like, cars driving themselves, taxis driving themselves and all that. But then we haven't had conversations about we adapting to the new things that we have now. We talk about climate change and its impact and everything, and we are still producing the way we produce, and we are still consuming the way we consume. And I'm thinking about, when are we going to start, excuse me, having conversations about we adapting to what we have done to the earth right now? Because production is crazy, consumption is crazy, and Michael mentioned something very, very important. It's about changing the mindset. But every time when people are talking about, issues, the only question I ask them that, are you sure we are willing to do that? We are not willing, because people's mindsets have been, put to a certain level that there is an economic standard. So if you're rich and you consume more, you have the stage. And that is the thing of the day. And no one is ready to change this conversation. And as George said, there is never going to be any change in the energy sector. There's never going to be any change in the social issues and everything if we don't change our mindset. And that is because we have been trained to be wasteful, right? And then we have also accepted it. And that has been the standard of today. So why are cars being produced so many from, every continent or all across the globe, more than the people who are using them? And Michael always gives examples of cars, graveyards of cars. And these are not old cars. These are new cars. And this, we are not even talking about big stuff. Let's come to the very small things. You go to the supermarket and then you look at the things over there, and none of them gives you the opportunity to be like, okay, I'm going to pick this up, and then afterwards I'm going to return the package so that whoever produced it can take it back and then put another product inside that container for me. Everything is single use, single use, single use. So when it comes to production and consumption, we can talk for so many years and we are not going to end. But for me, the issue here is, are we really willing to have that commitment, change our attitudes and change our mindsets? That is where I strive to make a change, because we can keep having conversations, but then where is the impact going to be? Are the people who are really going to make the policies to control our behaviors willing to do that? Are we going to put aside our political priorities? Are we going to put aside our economic priorities? These are the questions that I keep asking myself.
And Michael, I think you have something to add, please.
Yes, if I can skip to it. So just one example, David just mentioned the packaging and so on. This crate, you see how big it is comparing to my head. In this crate came blueberries from Chile to Czech Republic. They are repacked, and this plastic crate is thrown away in a garbage without any damage. This is just one of very small examples. And last month, a cruise ship in German Hafen, in German harbor, should be almost completed cruise ship, should be recycled because the buyer do not have money to buy, and nobody considered that it can be reused because the capacity of such a cruise ship, this is a small city, in fact. But what I would like to say, I'm doing my job for 9 years. For 9 years, I'm building wasteless world. Not a single company joined me because of sustainability. But every single one joined me because waste prevention make them more profitable. But if you combine these two, there is nothing. I do not like the economic system, but I know I will not change it. But if I use it and I make somebody more profitable with less damaging, then it's the right way. And this is just what I would like to say, because George has something to add to this for sure.
So
we cannot hear you.
Yeah. What I had to say is that, even though we think that this is not really, we're not resolving it, in small efforts, things will come to place. And small efforts are being done all over the world. And it's just for us to encourage those initiatives and move forward. For example, right here where I live in Calgary, here in Canada, the city itself is taking more effort to say, we have so much of offices where we have land. What are we going to do with that? Can we grow food here? Can we? Because there's a whole lot of things that we found that Canada being what it is, it's spread over so much of land. And we're bringing food from all over the world. And a farmer that had to grow food in a small land, now he has to build his land 10 times what he had previously in 10 years to put some commercial product, which like maize or corn, than what he had done before. And that could feed his family. And we have lost that culture of farming. So the city is saying, let's build something. Let's use the places. Let's use that to see if somebody wants to build farms in that. So, and I'm looking at it like, just last few weeks ago, I've started volunteering in a place. That's one thing of Canada. Most people volunteer. That's one thing that I was surprised when I came to Canada 20 years back. Everybody here volunteers. They do a lot more volunteering work than the actual work. That's what I've seen. And I found there are a lot of people who are volunteering there. And they've been growing food for the last 3 years. And it's things, small things, but it's a small initiative. It's things like this. And I also believe that if we really want to make the change, we have to look at all of this in a critical infrastructure. We look at this gross income and things like that, but we look at those critical infrastructure like food and water, energy, manufacturing, IT sector, safety, health of our people. All of these things are connected. And this is where I think the system approach to eliminate waste is saying that, let's not do something which is going to affect something else. Let's not start building just for one initiative and then think that is eliminating waste. Well, you might be the one causing something else. It's not like the oil and gas companies don't want to make the change. The option is people are buying it. People have to, and as much as it. And this is where I take my hats off for Canadian oil and gas sector. They're trying so much that what I could see. I've worked in Middle East. Through my father for 20 years, I lived in Nigeria, and I know what is going on all over the world and where we are doing in Canada here. There's an effort here, but it's just it's an isolated effort. That is where I think, as a whole systems thing, and we work together. That's,
I'd love to stay on that subject, George, because especially here in Europe, the subject of energy is something that we talk about 5 times a day, especially considering that we are all expecting a very cold winter because we will not have enough LNG to provide gases to all the homes. And I see a common thread between the packaging that David talked about, the production that's taking place, because the energy has been so cheap that they didn't have to think about it. And I'd be curious from your perspective how you see these various components, the actual reserves and how we produce those reserves, what's taking place on the market, and how this relates to the subject of waste. I know that was a huge subject.
If I can just shortly, George, we have exactly this discussion yesterday with my US partner. And generally, we came to the conclusion that it does not matter how many solar power stations and wind and so on we put on a field, or even nuclear power station. It doesn't matter. If we do not change our behavior first in consumption, it will be never enough. So my government just yesterday announced that we secure 80%, or we filled 80% of our LNG tanks somewhere in Netherlands and so on, that it should be enough. So I wrote to the Prime Minister, it doesn't matter whether you fill it with 80 or 100%. If we do not stop wasting it, it will never be enough. So, and there is a way how to do it. The people are ready to change. And you see it, you show it to someone, and this someone is able to change the next day. David sent just a few days ago from a restaurant image where an old can is transferred for a hold of nappies or whatever. Yes, the people are ready to change. The issue is that the governments are so, let's say, slow in action that they will come with solution 10 years after it is not needed anymore. And that's the topic which I see.
I think that particular point could be raised as a whole show. And I would like to go back to the subject, but first I'd like to go ahead and give George an opportunity to take on that gnarly problem I just kind of threw in your ways. Just maybe to recap again, the cost of energy and to what degree that has been a way for us to be wasteful, because we did not value the actual, not the actual resource per se, but in the means by which we actually extracted that energy, which we should never forget of all the waste that's taking place. You mentioned a number of instances, or enough initiatives rather said, that are taking place in Canada. I'd be really curious to find out a little bit more about that, especially as you mentioned that using my words, that the Canadian industry almost feels like they're Don Quixote doing all this on its own, where there's not really much support coming from other parts of the world.
And I also want to say, even within Canada also, like, we talked about government being slow. It's not only, it's also the industry too. The industry is stuck with what it is. How do you change that? And that's where the individual efforts. And, when I look at from a project, when I put a project management hat, what I say is that they go in there, when a project is done, it's when you start looking, then you find the inefficiencies, you find the interdependencies and try to resolve. And then you go through. Like, for example, we have seen here that the oil and gas, we've drilled so much. Now we've got to reuse that. We've got to use that. We've got to make use of that. Like, there is an initiative by a few companies here to say there's already power lines going there. There's already all of those things to go through that drill, for that rig to work before. Now, instead of fully abandoning it, can we use that same thing to build other things? Like solar, can we use that for something else? So those are small initiatives. And, these initiatives happening in pockets and pockets within the country too. Either, entrepreneur try to get things, and the system that has to go through it to get a funding or to help him to nudge to do something. It's so become bureaucratic. And this is where I think individuals in different places rather than, as a whole government, as a society. This whole thing is, am I the one who is creating waste for something else to happen? And that's one thing that comes to me also. Like and as a country, let's say if we could produce a lot more LNG. In Canada, we have got oil, gas, we've got all of the minerals that we need. For example, Rio Tinto has come from Australia. There's a whole bunch of, fertilizer plants that's being built. They're going to spend about $5 billion worth of fertilizers plant being built here. Where is that fertilizer going to go? Is that going to places like Africa, where because I've lived there, you throw stuff on the ground, it grows. I've seen that, right? What is that, right? Can we not think of other things? Like, that's one of the initiatives that I'm trying to say. Can we use the organic waste to produce, fertilizers, natural fertilizers and things like that, compost more effectively? So and can we mix that with other energy sources, like decentralized energy sources, to build a society in which way it is? So that is where I think we need more of those decentralized initiatives that should come forward, and to encourage those initiatives. And that will take a whole bunch of effort. That's where I think.
And I almost think, David, that George handed you the baton because, of course, first of all, you come from a country where they recently, maybe about 10 years ago, where a fair amount of oil was found off the coast of Ghana.
Yes.
And I remember the conversations that were taking place at that time where your country people were saying, what are we going to do with this wealth? Where we look at the situation 10 years past, and very often we will say that having resources is almost a curse because we by nature become very wasteful and become very profligate. And then being one part of the equation, we are still we're very fortunate here in Europe. The Europeans don't realize how fortunate they are. But if we look at a situation, say, for example, like Canada, where they are not only energy self-sufficient, but they are able to export their energy. You've lived in a number of places in the world where there are no energy and you had to import all of that. And I would be very keen to hear from your perspective how all these parts come to play in your experiences.
Well, that's a
huge subject, I know.
Yeah, it's really a lot of things to unfold, because I know a couple of colleagues in this area who, even some time ago, there was a conversation where the government wanted to introduce nuclear plants and into the society, because in Ghana the main source of energy is hydro, which was built a couple of years ago. We are still supplying even the neighboring countries with this source of energy. And so we needed more support because, of course, the nation is having that kind of pressure. And there was a lot of advocacy about, educating the people about the impact of the nuclear. And people are still thinking about the other options. There is even the government introducing solar in the northern part of the country and other resources to help us to get that kind of energy efficiency. But the thing is about, conversations still need to go through, because now the African continent, most of African countries are torn between developing and also concerned about sustainability. Well, not all of them are concerned, because the idea is we find the natural resources and we find the opportunities and we just have to exploit them. But then the people are concerned here. We don't have energy efficiency, but we have to find a balance between we having access to these facilities and also being sustainable. Because right now, if I always say to my colleagues and friends about this, that if Africa is having the impact or facing the majority of the impact of climate change, whilst we are emitting less than 4% of, contributing to less than 4% of the global emissions, what happens in the next 50 years if everything turns around and we are the industrious part of the world, and then we are emitting like more than 30% of it? Who is going to feel the impact then more? I always think about this thing. So I say that we should not wait for the West or other parts of the world to tell us that we have to develop sustainably. We have to find the alternatives for ourselves. Development is good, it's good for the people, it's good for society and everything. But then why don't we think that we will be the first continent to develop sustainably when it comes to energy, when it comes to whatever aspect of our lives? And it comes with investment. But I think that most of it all, the important thing is that the willingness, as I mentioned earlier. And this conversation can go on and on, but the most important part of this whole thing is we always refer to COVID. COVID has taught us a lot of things that we have to evolve from. And I think COVID has explicitly taught us that we are not willing, but then if we are pushed to the edge of the table, we will make a change. And look at how different parts of the world responded to COVID. I'm sorry, I need to more.
No worries.
And look at how different parts of the world responded to COVID. And I think that this is the same way that we have to approach climate change, energy crisis, sustainability, preventing waste, and every other aspect for the future of the earth. Because we need to respond to this with urgency. And, George made mention about something, small changes and individual coming up with things. But I think the two of them, Michael and George, also made issue about there's challenge with the government slowly responding to things. And then the industry is also slow to things. But when you put these things together, it's all about, it's building up to something, political priorities, and then economic standards, which Michael mentioned that he does not like. And that is what is ruling this whole thing. And it comes back to Africa's key. So in terms of responding to this urgently, we need to all be on the same page, because honestly, lots of people are making changes individually, small groups, private institutions. But honestly, the urgency of climate change and the urgency of we getting sustainably globally doesn't require these small steps. It needs an urgent movement. And that is why we are asking that waste can be prevented, because, I think we've talked a lot, but we actually didn't mention what does it mean that we are preventing waste. The whole idea is that you take a resource from the earth and then you use it for a product, and then afterwards you dump it. That shouldn't be the case. Why did you take a resource and created a product, and after you call it waste? It doesn't make sense. It's the same resource. Why don't you reverse that process you used for the production and get that resource again and produce something? That is what we are saying. In that sense, we don't have to keep degrading and taking things every day. That is all that we are saying, right? Most of these processes are reversible. So why can't we just do that to make the world more sustainable? And that is the idea that I have, honestly. And it cuts across energy. And I'm really looking forward that across the continent of Africa, and especially for my country in Ghana, we will look out and invest more into more sustainable options collectively. And I hope these ideas will be initiated by the government. And that will be very, very good for us, for other countries to also learn from.
Wonderful. Michael, if I can, I'd love to piggyback on that of what David said, but I have a very specific question to you. The idea of take, make, dispose, something that I think is, if not everybody knows about it, they know about it intrinsically, because that is the way that we manage things. And in that of what David was describing, if we're able to bring things back to a system, then we're talking about a regenerative system. And the question for you would be tied to looking at your solutions that you've been working on over the last few years, and certainly in the inception of Industry 5.0. Could you maybe tell us about what role regeneration or regenerative models play in that of what your solution portfolio is to be found?
If we call it regeneration, I call it at the beginning industrial upcycling, but it was generally exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. So every single project is based on that, because we can utilize things instead of scrapping. There was a discussion yesterday as well on one conference which I participated. What is the difference between recycling and upcycling, or we can say recycling and regeneration, if we use the word? It's a very simple thing. If you want to recycle, you have to make waste first, because it's waste recycling. It's not product recycling, it's waste recycling. So you have to downgrade a product to zero or below zero because you pay for the waste management. And then something is done. So there is this curve down with a value. But with regeneration or upcycling, you take the product and you rise up without this downsizing. So very simple to understand. If I would like to recycle, I have to make waste first. If I need to upcycle or regenerate, there is no waste in between. And this is the biggest difference. And what I would like to just add to George and David topic is one simple thing. What I am trying to create with the help of George and David and all the others is that these small players, which are very important, are connected. They have the umbrella. Industry 5.0 is the umbrella, connecting those who are ready to contribute to wasteless world. Because Industry 5.0 is a way how to get to the wasteless world, how to change the industries without damaging the industries generally. Because if the car producer is suffering at the moment because he still keep the old way to producing cars which are not sold because there is missing one small component which did not came from China because of. So he put it in this graveyard because these cars will not probably be sold anymore. But if he change it in a way that he will produce according to the real demand that I need a car, it will be produced for me, then it will change completely because there will be not material consumption, anything, and it will be generally the one great example about regeneration, which I'm right now discussing with Škoda, Volkswagen, and Hyundai, is I have a car. Usually I don't use it, but if I go somewhere far, I have to use my card. Otherwise, I use my electric unicycle. But if there will, and it has combustion engine, it's an old car. But if I have the opportunity to take my car, go to the factory which produced the car and let it electrify, this is example of regeneration. Because the transfer from combustion to electric can be done within 24 hours. For me, I will do it. I don't need to ride 1,000 kilometers in my car. The standard 200, 300 will be enough for me to use it. And this is one example of the regeneration. And they are right now considering, because they never thought to take the old car back. But can you imagine better pool of clients and customers than your satisfied customers which already ride your car to go there? You can charge them for, these companies will be much more profitable. And I don't say to change the entire factory to produce electric car, just one production line. And I proposed it 3 years ago. They are still thinking.
Yeah, like you said, and I think, Michael, the key is for industry to change. It is not easy to suddenly say, yeah, let's do this. And that's where the individuals have to be empowered. Like, it's not the government. Like, the government might have a set idea. Oh, I want climate change. Let's shut down oil and gas in Canada. That's not the answer. That's not the solution. What are we going to do together? That's where the individuals come from. And this is where I think Industry 5.0 can bring those people, empower those ideas to come forward and see it from this waste perspective. Am I wasting it? Can I do something effectively, do something more with it? And that is where the key is. And, we can talk all about electric cars and, all of those things, but you're going to mine all over the world to build for minerals. That is, maybe, do we need so much of cars? Like, for example, I come from India, where we had so much of things together. We had public transportation, all of that. Now everybody wants 3 cars. That's the situation. But, this is a play. This is where things change. And for example, you talked about oil in Africa. My father, when I was young, he went to work in Nigeria because he met somebody who said, all of these oil and gas companies are coming to Nigeria. I need to make sure that our local people needs to be trained to take care of these jobs. So he resigned his job. Actually, he was working in Iran, and he went to Nigeria, and he took all of us there. And that's when, I was privileged, I was lucky. So that really gave me a world perspective. Is, are we funding, even the funding part? Like, for example, Africa has got so much of resources. There are other things, like people are trying to get initiatives to work with, biogas and those kind of things. But when you have funding in one direction, it's going to move into that direction. People are going to take the easy chair. So this is where I think the thinking process in individuals say, do I want to take the easy path? The government is giving me funding. Let's put everybody who can have their hands to do something with their hand to go and do technology data science. Or do I do something physically to do something, to grow something or do something productive? And that's where the thinking process has to happen in individuals.
I just would like to add one very fresh information. Yesterday, California governor approved the ban of single-use items, single-use plastics generally. It was yesterday. It was a ban of single-use items and the need for introduction of compostable. So everything should be recyclable and compostable. I put my comment on this, saying I'm not happy about it. Why? Because the people who sign it, they do not understand that recycling or sorting is to be recycled. It's stated there that every item, every packaging should be recyclable or compostable. This is the words which are used, but they do not consider how far it is from recyclable to be recycled and compostable to be composted. And it's crazy because the governor, I sent him invitation to become part of my network half a year ago generally, and we already introduced so-called waste prevention legislation which solved this issue. Because according to the World Bank prediction, I think 97% of everything which is of the raw material can be reused or recycled. But the reality at the end is 13.5%. And I think it is overestimated. This is what the World Bank says, this is official report. So we really have to change the way of understanding the matters, because what will cause this new law in California, you will see new line on the standard packaging, which will say it's recyclable. That's all. It will be greenwashing again. It will be used for greenwashing. Everything will be, from the next moment, will be everything recyclable. It is recyclable. In fact, even this bottle will turn in oil in 1,000 years. So in some way, it is recyclable. And don't speaking about the pyrolysis and this system which already exists to turn it fast. But it is wrong way how we use and understand the language. You can try in your school or in your environment. If I ask in Europe, in a room filled with people, who of you recycle? 99% put the hand up. And then I face them and say, sorry, you are lying, because you do not recycle. You sort. And sorting from recycling, it's a very far journey. But unfortunately, the waste industry and many others put this in our hand. That's all from me. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. I was too quick at the gun here. That's a great segue to a question that I have to you, David, especially tied to something that you mentioned, having global warming or the climate change as being perhaps the impetus, and you made the comparison with COVID. There was something else that happened. For me, it was completely amazing. At that time, very shortly after I had my first conversation with Michael, we had the first days of the pandemic, and we started to realize this model that we have created, where of global supply chains, where all of a sudden you could not bring produce, or you could not bring products from A to B. And who suffered the most? It was not the Europeans. It was not the North Americans. They were the people in the global South, because I remember hearing stories where pigs were being fed avocado because you were growing plants or growing produce that were not used locally. They were only for export. So there's one component we haven't talked about so far, and that has been the consumer. We've concentrated on government, and we've talked a little bit about industry. But let's be honest, and this goes back to the question of cheap energy, as I mentioned with George. It's all tied to me and convenience. In other words, if things are easier, then that's going to be our choice. They don't have to be more meaningful. They have to be easier. So my question for you, sorry, that was a very long segue. If we look at these global supply chains, knowing full well that they are not regenerative in any way, shape, or form for the global South, and we the privileged ones cannot just go ahead and say we'll do it on our own. First of all, we forgot how, and secondly, we don't realize the damage that would be caused because we saw that in March 2020. So I am getting to the question, hard to believe, but I am. In your opinion, what should be the approach? Again, making sure that there is no waste. That is our objective, making sure that it's taking care of everybody. What would be your approach in addressing that problem?
Thank you, Michael. This is a very important question, and I think there are a lot of things to unfold in this. But the first word that comes to mind, and is something that I've been talking about a lot in this space, is localizing. And if you're very curious enough to open a laptop or a system unit of a computer, you realize that the processor, as you mentioned, is just buttress on your point. It's made somewhere. The hard disk is made from somewhere, but the whole computer itself is said that made in China or probably made in somewhere else. So it means the components did come from, so many areas. Let's come into our everyday lives necessities like food. It will surprise you that even in certain localities, George made mention about something like in Africa, you just drop something on the ground and it grows. You'd be surprised how much food we import from other countries. And this is something that really baffles my mind, that why can't we do localized things? So the approach to this will be that we have to try as much as possible, right? Whether from top to down or up to down, from down to top, that we can try and localize things to make the impact a little bit lesser. If we localize things, transportation will be lesser. We wouldn't need to be shipping things. Try as much as possible that if a raw material, let's say in Ghana, we produce a lot of cocoa. We are the second leading cocoa producers in the world. But then how many finished product companies do we have in the country? And recently our government passed a new policy of Ghana Beyond Aid and said that he's not going to send cocoa products to Switzerland anymore. And this was a big challenge because they were used to the fact that all our raw materials are set. We cannot even process them into semi-finished products. And this is a big struggle. And look at how many cocoa processing companies we have all across the globe. Why can't we have the companies in Ghana using sustainable energy? And then we don't need to do more transportation. Transportation will be probably products or something like that. And I think that lessens the thing. For me, food is something that is very, very important. And if we are importing food across the continent, of course, it's not everything that you can produce within a country. But if we can try and reduce this a little bit, that will be good for us. And then the second thing, of course, education, because as George mentioned, there is a loophole in the coordination, right? We are not coordinating enough. We've talked about the governments, the industry, and everyone, but then we are not coordinating enough. I mean, consumers. Why would someone decide that? Okay, recently there was this Netflix documentary about fish and how it's been produced. It doesn't mean that all fish industries are producing in a very bad way. But then the issue is that they left us with one concern. When you're going to buy your tuna, you have to check the label and be sure about the company and how they are producing to be able to do that. But I am doing that, but Michael is not. And there are a lot of other Michaels who are not. So there has to be a sort of education where we have to coordinate in that. Someone says that you go to a shop and you don't take extra plastics or you take your reusable bags. But trust me, if the supermarkets, let's say, I don't know, whichever supermarket, Walmart or whatever thing it is, has 5 packs of single-use plastics that is good as bags, trust me, if I don't take it, the bags will get finished by the end of the day. And so at the end, did we move forward on that? So as we need education in the sense that everyone could be on the same page. Michael made mention about, California, one country, one state passing this ban and policy. And that is one big issue that I have right now, because a lot of work is not being done to coordinate the academia and the industry. And this is because academia has brought us all the solutions that we need. We saw the IPCC report. But how many people are going to read that over 3,000 document? It has been summarized. But then how many industries understand it? How many individuals understand it? Let's also understand that there is a large group of people who are illiterate and cannot read. And how many people have that in their local, languages to be able to understand what is happening, right? And even the people who are at the top, the government, are making mistakes to pass laws that do not actually help us, or that are actually just greenwashing and just following the trends, and like people are giving them pressure. So there has to be a way we coordinate with academia, because academia is really, a lot of people, really from my experience in talking to people in academia, they find it hard to even express themselves. We need another industry to even help coordinate the academia industry and the industry itself, as well as policymakers and the everyday people who are called the consumers, right? So there's a lot to unfold in this. And of course, I'm sure George and Michael will have a lot to say about this. But for me, it's mainly about the education and also what I mentioned earlier. I've forgotten that point, but I'm sure it's out there. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you very much for that, David. We are, as is always the case, the time goes by far too quickly. And so I want to give each one of you the opportunity to come up with some closing messages. And I think David set the very good motif, and this is my interpretation of things that we need as a group, and perhaps even looking at it from the Industry 5.0 perspective, what your needs are, or what your calls to anybody who might be either viewing this video, or perhaps listening to the audio, or perhaps even reading the transcripts. So perhaps if we can start with you, George, if you can pass on a message to anyone who's receiving this information, specifically tied to what you're all trying to do as a collective, perhaps maybe if you could let us know what that would be.
I would say understand what is Industry 4.0, 5.0, and see how we can apply it in our individual places where we are. As an individual, as a company, as a society, what can we learn from that and implement that, apply that? We may not be able to do everything at the same time, but we learn this and do this together as a group. And that's I believe in humanity. When circumstances happen, when we are faced with situations and challenges, society will rise up to that. And it begins with each one of us. And that's where I would end with. Learn. Are we wasting? Are we doing something about it?
Wonderful. Thank you. Perhaps, Michael, if you can take the baton from George, that would be great.
I would like to say everybody can prevent waste happen. Now, immediately, for no cost. Just do it. And as I finish all my talks with the same sentence, I will do with this one as well. Let your time be free of waste and wasting in all its forms. Stay safe and free, because only so we will live in wasteless world, which Industry 5.0 built for all.
That's a call for liberation, if you ask me, David. Perhaps if I give you the last word, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Michael and George. It was really, really exciting to have this conversation, and thank you so much, Michael, as well, for hosting this. Lastly, I would just like to say that everyone's participation matters. So don't underestimate what you can do. Just find out the people who can help you. Let's collaborate. Let's go into partnership. Don't go out there shouting for demands and things has to be done without doing a proper research or finding out what is really, really the right thing to do. So please, let's all get on board and let's collaborate. And yeah, we can do it. All hope is not lost yet. And Industry 5.0 is not what we are seeing all across, that it's like, we're going to get digital and robots are going to start replacing us. And AI is good. It's super interesting. All these things can come under to help prevent waste. The world needs this, and that's what we are heading towards. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I love this call for empowerment that I just heard from David. And in fact, what we will ensure is for anyone who is actually picking up on this conversation in whatever form it may be, that we will make sure that you receive information about what Industry 5.0 is about, any additional information that the group here would like to go ahead and supply to you. We will make sure that you receive it.